Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hi guys, welcome back to a new episode on the Clear to Send show. I'm here with Roel this morning. Good morning, Roel.
Good morning.
And today we're going to talk about Extreme Network. And, what a better person than Mike Leibovitz to talk about Extreme Network. So we have Mike here on the show this morning. Good morning, Mike.
Hey, good morning, guys. Certainly excited to be here today.
So the idea to talk about Extreme a little bit came about 3 weeks ago. I was doing a training for Extreme reseller, and they were just talking to me about the different product. And I've never had to work with Extreme product. I've worked with the Zebra, Motorola. I guess it's now Extreme, but it used to be at another company. I worked with different products from Zebra and Motorola, but I've never actually had the opportunity to work with Extreme products. So I thought it would be a good idea to just touch base a little bit with you, Mike, on how the company's been doing and after the different acquisitions and how the future looks like for you guys.
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys and the audience, the Clear to Send audience, for sure. It's been awfully exciting here at Extreme, really for the last 2 years, probably even more than 2 years, in terms of sort of transforming our business. So both from a business perspective and a technology perspective, there's been lots of different and interesting and exciting things for us as we grow and really become a true force in the organization.
So before we start talking about Extreme, Mike, do you want to present yourself a little bit to those of you who don't know you? Maybe, talk about, how you got started with Wi-Fi and with Extreme.
Yeah, sure. I mean, hopefully, everybody knows me. but for those that don't, so my name is Mike Leibovitz. I'm certainly appreciative, Francois, for the correct pronunciation, because even I don't pronounce my last name very well. So many people just refer to me as Mike Leib or even Leib, which is a perfectly good and an easy way to say my name. But I've been at Extreme for about 10 years, and I've actually been focused primarily on the Wi-Fi sector for about the last decade. So since about 2007, 2008 timeframe. Previous, I kind of grew up for a number of years as a sales engineer, a routing switching guy, voice guy, security guy. And then one day while I was working a previous job, I kind of got put into a hospital and had to make a very large and robust Wi-Fi network function. I literally had no idea anything about Wi-Fi. I thought it was just kind of a toy. And here I was configuring a very, very large Wi-Fi network on behalf of the wireless team for this particular service provider. And from there, it just really became something kind of magical, and it just really caught my attention above and beyond IP networking, routing, and switching and stuff. I had a great opportunity to go in a number of different roles, from product management to CTO role, corporate marketing roles, all here at Extreme Networks. Today, I'm actually the director of product strategy and product management for our wireless products. So there's roughly 10 product managers that work with me on my team. We oversee all of our mobility products, our wireless product lines, and our cloud product offering as well. And so that's probably a good recap of where I've been, who I am, and where I'm hopefully going in the future.
That's good. Thank you, Mike. So do you want to go back a little bit and explain the different phases in acquisition that Extreme Network went through in the past few months? Maybe explain how it impacted the different product lines and the different strategy of the business.
Yeah, so we've gone through. Actually, it's coming up on a year, and it's almost. I say it to some of my colleagues, and we sort of take a step back and go, "Wow, it's been almost a year." So October 30th or 31st was when we actually closed the acquisition of the Wing product portfolio. So as you mentioned, technology and asset acquisition that came from Zebra, previously from Motorola, that many are familiar with. So it's been about a year actually since we've been owning and operating that business. I say it actually quite positively because, when time goes by fast, typically you're having fun and things are going very well. And so it's almost been a bit of a blur the last year, and things have gone really, really well in terms of the acquisition and integration, our go-to-market, and obviously the corresponding revenue that comes from all of that. About 2 months ago, so a number of weeks ago, I don't even know if it's been 2 full months, we actually were able to successfully close the asset acquisition from the Avaya networking business that was formerly Nortel, and even goes all the way back to Bay or Baystack Technologies. And so that acquisition, that asset acquisition, has been actually really positive for the business as well. There's some really, some new technologies that come with that, some fabric and campus switching technologies that come with the Avaya product portfolio. And then we're on the cusp. It's coming hopefully in the next couple of weeks, where we'll be in position to announce the closing of another asset acquisition, which is the Brocade data center business that we're looking to acquire. And so one of the things that gets interesting is, what do you do with all of these assets? How do you put it together? How do you intelligently go to market and tell your existing customers, your prospects, or even your channel, right, our partners, on how to position? And we really look at what we refer to as pins, or places in the network, and where each of our technologies play very well and where they have strength. And that's ultimately how we position the different technologies, from the access layer to the campus to the data center, and really play to our strengths, ultimately give our customers the best of breed, purpose-built solutions to solve the problem for their business in a given vertical, in a given vertical business, and away we go.
Okay, yeah, it looks like it's been going well. I looked at the stock market, and Extreme is a public company.
Yeah.
And so stock value has increased from $4.5 to $11.5 in the last year. So I'm guessing it's going well.
Yeah, there's no question from a shareholder value perspective that things have gone incredibly well over the last year. In fact, if you roll it back even a year prior to that, you would see us hovering around $2 or a little over $2, the $2 mark. And really, what you see in terms of share or stock price is really a testament to the management, to our upper management, our CEO all the way down, really being focused, really knowing what we're here, why we're here, and what we're trying to do, and everybody in the company marching towards that same goal. And so, shareholder value or stock price is the result of a company that's performing, doing exactly what we say that we're going to do, and proving those results quarter after quarter. And there's been a pretty good run over the last 8 quarters of us meeting or exceeding our expectations to the street. And so, again, that's really just evidence of, our own sales force, our channel, our partners that are out there being, very successful, and ultimately our customers that really look to Extreme to help solve business problems. And something that we're doing, I think, rather successfully is, keeping, maintaining, growing our customer install base, and more importantly, keeping that very close touch that we're known for in the industry. Really working closely with our customers from pre-sales all the way to post-sales, and really helping our customers, again, solve those business problems.
Yeah, what can you go into what you guys saw in Zebra and how that actually benefits some of the clients that you guys have? Like, what is it with Zebra that brought you guys into that acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways to look at it. Today we actually have 2 wireless product lines. Having 2 product lines is interesting. Some people look at it and say, hey, it's really challenging. I know some of my competitors walk around and say, clearly one of these 2 product lines is going away, so be careful which one you invest in. That's something that we typically refer to as FUD, that the competitors, doing their job, trying to throw these things around in the marketplace. But frankly, when you look at our 2 wireless product lines, they actually have kind of similar in terms of history longevity. Things that two product lines that started really commercially being offered back in about 2003 or the early 2000s. So two very strong, very mature wireless product lines that we bring to market today. The key difference between the two product lines is that one of them was built rather specifically to solve in the campus markets. The other one that was really built to solve in the distributed enterprise markets. And so when we think about the different types of verticals that play, when we talk about campus, we think about, higher education or healthcare, or of course our stadium practice, right? Where we remain as the official Wi-Fi provider for the National Football League and the official Wi-Fi analytics provider for the National Football League. Those are great representations of campus deployment. So fewer sites, or perhaps one site with many access points and many people in a high density scenario. That's really descriptive of the product line that we refer to as Extreme Wireless. Mm-hmm. Then when we look at the Wing product portfolio, what we refer to as Extreme Wireless Wing, that's a product line that has been purpose-built and really proven in terms of its historic success in the distributed enterprise markets. And so we think about particularly verticals like retail, right? Solving for distributed enterprise where you might have thousands of stores or more, mm-hmm. Transport logistics, hotels, a lot of the verticals where you're looking at a high level of distribution. And that's a very different type of problem that you're trying to solve in terms of deployment, troubleshooting, just day-to-day management. They're very, very different scenarios. So a lot of people ask me the question and say, hey, which product line wins? It's actually not about which one wins. We have an investment profile to actually keep both of them going forward, and a very interesting convergence plan for our hardware, for our management tools. And we'll keep both of these products going as we abstract the management and actually converge the hardware into what we refer to as a super spec access mm-hmm. point hardware.
Okay, because both product lines, you can get a controller for either, right? And then is one of them you can control via the cloud?
So we actually have a complete cloud offering. Actually, both product lines have a cloud offering. We've converged those clouds together in a product that we refer to as Extreme Cloud. Mm-hmm. In terms of the kind of traditional deployment model, yes, both do have controllers. It's actually one of the stark differences between how the two products are designed or built, or really how they're intended to be used. In the Wing scenario, Wing really has evolved to a point where you're not really looking at controllers at the remote sites, right? And so a lot of people are familiar with Aruba Instant, mm-hmm. For example. Wing has been on market longer than Aruba Instant. Some would say that Aruba potentially took some creative liberties on how they designed the Instant product comparative to Wing. There's still some pretty strong things that Wing has in its solution that our competitors do not. And so you leverage the controller and Wing deployment more for your reporting and troubleshooting mm-hmm. than necessary for data plane. In our campus solution, it's actually quite the opposite. And so in the campus solution, Extreme Wireless, the controller actually typically does participate from a data plane perspective, actually the traffic going through it. And that's true in our stadium deployments, typically in healthcare deployments, where you're really looking for seamless mobility, layer 3 roaming, and again, kind of that centralization of traffic in a campus architecture. And so it's really nice for us to have both those offerings the way that I usually talk about it certainly to the industry and to our resellers, is that we have two chances, right? Two great chances to beat our competitors in any given scenario, because one of our solutions is going to be superior mm-hmm. to what our competitors are offering. It's just a matter of prescriptively bringing in the right solution at the right time to solve that problem for our given customers.
Gotcha.
So if we were to take the top of the line AP, flagship AP that you guys offer, would you be able to just walk through the different specs? How many radios do you have? Is it Wave 2 and all of these details?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it depends on how deep you want to go. And obviously, each of our product lines have a flagship. When you look at clearly we have Wave 2 wireless products, 4x4. One of the things that's unique on on the wing side of it, is a tri-radio access point. The tri-radio 8533 is a relatively unique product in terms of its capability to not only provide client servicing, but also security services on the third radio, including integration support with air defense, which is still the de facto best wireless intrusion prevention security system on the market, which came as part of that asset acquisition. And so if you roll the clock back to the Motorola days and you think about an access point like the 7131, I mean, that was really a cutting edge, innovative product that was brought to market. Nobody was really building at all tri-radio access points. And so there's a lot of great heritage from the Motorola, radio technology. I mean, a lot of people say in the industry, Motorola and radios are two words that typically go together in the same sentence. And so there's a lot of great things in terms of not just Wings firmware, but, radio, precision in terms of antennas and radio RF propagation. Those are things that, some customers really, really value in certain scenarios and others perhaps not, right? And so when you get into really, really tricky RF scenarios like warehouses or high ceilings, retail scenarios, there's some pretty specific things that have been built into these access points in terms of the integrated antennas and actually how they propagate RF without requiring an external antenna. And so those are things that, again, when we talk about purpose-built, have been put into those access points specifically to solve problems in those given verticals. On the extreme wireless side, we have also a 4x4, kind of the flagship access point, a Wave 2 access point. It has a really high-performing flow-based characteristic inside of it. That flow-based architecture is something that's actually industry unique in terms of its ability to actually split the data plane, so centralized and distributed data plane simultaneously on the same radio and the same SSID, and some really, really interesting deployment scenarios that you can get into, our customers can get into, in terms of securing from layer 2 to layer 7, traffic, quality of service, running analytics on the traffic, basically as you prescribe it, all through a coordinated policy. And so that's something that's really unique in terms of the extreme wireless capability from a flagship and sort of a software perspective.
What are the scenarios for someone to use flow-based? Because you can, based on the SSID, it's either centralized or distributed. What's a use case for doing that? An example that somebody would use?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea of a flow-based, and this is where it starts. It's interesting, right? When you think about our company, we have a lot of patents, a lot of heritage, a lot of things that we've done in the switching world for many, many years. One of the acquisitions that Extreme had made, a company called Enterasys, was actually well known for flow-based switching and actually building ASICs that specifically provided flow-based characteristics through the switch. We've actually been able to port that feature instead of relying on hardware, actually being able to port that into software and being able to enable that on our access point. So what does that enable you to do? Well, really, I would say mostly from a packet processing perspective. When you think about doing a lookup or the kind of traditional, route once, switch many, that's essentially what you get in a flow-based architecture. So why is it advantageous? Well, if you line up, really anybody's access point on the market, any of my competitors, you look at FCC regulations, we're all going to essentially be giving you the same amount of, RF coverage, generally speaking. We're all going to give you roughly the same amount of performance for one client connected to an open SSID. There's not going to be a huge variation in what you're going to see from a performance perspective. But that's not real world, right? So what does a real world scenario look like? A real world scenario typically looks like, and again, depending on the vertical like healthcare, a customer certainly would be interested in protecting their SSID. So you're going to turn on encryption. Then you're going to look at actually running different types of role-based control, or what we would call policy. So as you start adding more and more of these policies onto the access point and onto the radio, what happens from a performance perspective? So said differently, let's say 10 different types of roles all connected to the same radio and the same SSID. Your data plane is sending some central, it's bridging some with the AP. each of those roles have different types of rules put in them from layer 2 to layer 7. Now start putting load on the access point. And what happens with a competitor? You're going to see the performance start dropping. With a flow-based architecture, you don't. And so that's really the use case for us when we talk to our customers about why does flow-based matter. It really matters if you care about a loaded radio with many clients, let's say 50 to 70 clients on it, and you require security, quality of service, and analytics on each of those sessions. That's something that the flow-based characteristic gives you. Again, route one, switch many, means that as we identify the application that's come through, we don't need to do that lookup and take a hit on the CPU every time a packet comes in. And so we maintain and assure performance through those sessions.
Okay, so it's more about performance on the actual access point itself.
Correct. That's exactly what it is.
So is it something you implement in the stadiums?
Actually, it was born. It was really born in the stadiums, and it was. Again, you look at sort of where you deploy your technology and how you start tuning it over the years. We really started with the New England Patriots back in 2011. Was the first project. 2012 was the first season, so it might have actually been 2010 when we started with them. But as you start deploying more stadiums, and you realize, so the first deployment we did at Gillette was an 11N. Right? We actually deployed 11N access points. We built our own antennas. It was a very, very successful deployment, but we realized kind of over time that more devices, more users, more applications are going to grow. In fact, the opening day at Gillette this year, so now it's been upgraded. It's running Wave 2. It's got underseat APs. We ran about 9 terabytes of data through the stadium, which is almost Super Bowl levels in terms of what you'd expect. So that was just opening day at Gillette Stadium. But going back to, originally in your question is that, over time we realized that, even though we were able to control the radio frequency and we built really, really specific antennas for stadium use cases, that we needed to do more in our software. And so a different way to say it or a different way to think about it is that because, we have a lot of heritage on the switching side of our business, we really have been focused, and we've thought about the wireless problem in terms of the Ethernet port on the AP, right? So there's a whole bunch of interesting and cool things you need to do on the radio side, but you also need to be able to transition from 802.11 to 802.3 and how well and how fast. And so that's been something we focused on for many years. And then eventually we started realizing, these flow characteristics in our switching platform become very interesting to start bringing over into our access points. And so there's a lot of things, in terms of hyperscale technologies, and we look at kind of the bigger picture of the IT industry or the networking industry. Things that weren't possible, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or required dedicated hardware or dedicated ASICs. Those are things that software and perhaps x86 or off the shelf, you start changing the paradigm a little bit. And so that's exactly what's happened with our, switching heritage and being able to take the logic and reinstantiate it in software and then be able to run it on an AP. It's a perfect example of kind of that hyperscale sort of mentality and sort of Moore's Law, really, year over year, being able to do things bigger, better, smarter, faster, with less hardware being required.
Yeah, it's like you're moving some of the functions of the network stack down, now going towards the AP, where some of those functions, as long as you're not doing a performance hit on the APs, but they're pretty powerful and you're able to do some of those functions there. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the APs get faster and faster. I mean, we're starting to look, clearly we're starting to work on AX products. It's interesting because as we start marching towards AX, I don't think that we need an NDA to talk about some of this stuff, but even early 11AX products that'll come to market are likely going to have quad core CPU in them. That's a huge amount of processing power, especially when you think about some of the 11N APs that, we still have a lot of customers. In fact, we still have customers that buy 11N APs from us, which is, kind of interesting, perhaps kind of scary to some of the listeners out there. But as you get towards 11AX, a quad core CPU is a pretty interesting thing to have in a little access point. What do you do and how do you harness the power? There's things beyond just traditional packet or data processing and security. There's probably some innovative things that people are going to be thinking about with some of the other cores on those access points that we're going to be shipping in 2018.
So, talking about the future, Mike, it looks like you guys have very complete solutions, networking solutions, switching, routing, Wi-Fi, network access control, wireless and insurance prevention system, location-based services. Like, it looks like you guys have a complete solution. Last year, Gartner on the the Magic Quadrant placed you as a visionary company. I don't know if you got access to the new version of the Magic Quadrant, but I didn't see it yet. But do you think you guys are going to be up there with Cisco and HP this year?
So the new MQ is set to publish, I believe, before the end of this month, before the end of September 2017.
Okay.
Yes, I've seen the draft. I have a smile on my face, and I guess I could say I think that the results are really interesting this year. Certainly, we'll be happy. I think from an extreme perspective on where we're placed, I think that there's a pretty good representation of the market. Again, I've only seen the draft. I haven't seen what actually gets published, so there could be some changes, which is why I'm not necessarily sharing what I've seen on the draft. But clearly, every vendor participates. The process there typically is that there's a series of documentation and customer, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to get fed into Gartner. They analyze it, they create their documents, they send them back where we get to at least read what's in the draft specific to our company, and we have an opportunity to present to them and talk to them. And we typically do that throughout the year with Gartner and a number of other analyst firms as well that we work with. But I think that the MQ this year, again, if it publishes the way that I've seen it draft, is certainly something that we'll be excited about, and certainly something that you'll hear us speaking about to the industry. And it's quite different from the way it looked last year. I'll say that.
Okay, well, excited to see it. A couple more weeks.
Playing it
maybe
safe.
by the time that the podcast actually goes out in the next couple of days, we might actually see it published next week if all things go to bear. So the last week of September is what is the most recent timeline that I've been told via Gartner.
All right, perfect. So let's talk about the future. Like on the Wi-Fi side, you should have 10 product managers working with you. So I'm guessing you working on new products, new stuff, AX. So what are you guys focusing your energy on? Is it analytics, locations? We've seen a lot of move on the market around these, energies, or a bit more AX and the new Wi-Fi protocol?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, and kind of the way we have our team structured. We have some of the team that focuses down on the hardware and our firmware releases, and another part of the team that focuses kind of up the stack, as I would refer to it, on software and some solutioning that comes from the software. So there's no doubt. I mean, when you look at it, and I think that I think I'm talking rather generically and not even necessarily specific to Extreme, but most Wi-Fi buyers today are looking for something more than just hardware, right? There's still some, although I don't seem to see it as much. Prospects or customers that are still testing, which access point is faster than the other one. You still see that from time to time. And I think it's still relevant, right? It's still an interesting question. I mean, 10 years ago, probably even 5 years ago, that was a really hot question, right? Which access point is faster? Which one has better rate over range? All those sorts of things. I think today, the way that we typically design and deploy Wi-Fi, we're not really trying to solve a problem where a client is 100 feet away or 200 feet away from us. Typically, you're in a more dense environment where your problem really is, maybe 20 or 30 client devices connected to a given radio in short proximity or near proximity to it. So I think some of those dialogues have kind of gone away. I think that there's still a time and place for high performing, hardware, both actually on our switching side and our wireless side of my business that remains core to us. But really, so I should say, we are very focused on making sure that we have excellent access points and, excellent hardware to bring to our customers, high quality and high performing products. But, it's certainly our focus, and really the conversations that we get in with our customers is sort of, and you see the transformation of IT becoming more and more part of or relied on by different lines of business, or perhaps by a business itself, to help provide insights, analytics, business outcomes, perhaps trying to drive new revenue or offer better security or better, operational efficiencies. These are more the conversations that we get into with our customers around their business problems and how our technologies can help them solve those problems. And so there's no doubt, the Wi-Fi analytics, location analytics in certain verticals, guest analytics, who's doing what, when and where, how good is the quality of experience I can glean out of this. Certainly if I'm trying to drive, some revenue or trying to incur, let's say, better experiences and ultimately bringing people back into my environment. And these are probably very true, stadiums and retail scenarios and hotels, places where, Wi-Fi is absolutely offered as an amenity, but also as a differentiator. I mean, when we think about even airplanes and hotels, I'm sure it's true for you guys as well. If you know that a certain airplane is going to have Wi-Fi versus another one, you're probably going to choose to go on the flight with Wi-Fi.
Yeah, especially at the hotel. If it's not free, you may want to decide on a different hotel. Exactly.
And even worse in the hotel scenario is that, if you choose a hotel and the Wi-Fi is suspect or bad,
that goes into the review.
You're probably not going to go back to that one if you return to that city.
Right. Exactly.
That's a really paradigm. That's a big paradigm change for business owners to realize, holy smokes, if my Wi-Fi is underperforming or poor performing, I could lose customers. My customers may not return, because of that. And so that starts changing how they look at the wireless, the deployment, and being able to pull analytics, insights, information that come, again, in retail scenarios, whether you're down to micro-locationing or offers, people talk about coupons and all sorts of different interesting ideas. But when you really circle it all up to a top-level problem statement in many different verticals, again, think about stadiums, retail, a little bit hotel market, where experiences are critical. The big statement or top-level statement is that in many of these verticals or these businesses, these companies are competing against the couch, right? Staying at home with your own device and being able to order food or order, anything off Amazon, literally anything off of Amazon, perhaps watching the game at home. All of these things start creating sort of havoc or start wreaking problems for these businesses. So in many ways, when you top level the conversation, it's like, wow, you're actually competing against the couch and an iPad or your computing device of choice. And so I think a lot of organizations start looking at more around the experience. How can I get somebody off of their couch, bring them into my physical location, and then offer something to them that they can't get if they stay at home, right? And to me, personally, when I'm out with even some of our smaller customers, but certainly with our very, very large customers, that's the type of conversation that I'm having with them first and foremost. What are your business metrics? What are your KPIs? What are you really trying to solve? Now let me try to plug some of my technologies in there. And that's actually how we bring back our own insight and information to make sure that the products that we're building, our analytic tool sets, our visibility, our security products, are actually there to help them solve some of those problems.
Yeah, that's what I see now, is that Wi-Fi coverage and the quality and performance of that Wi-Fi is now kind of a given, right? That's what people expect to see. Now they're going beyond that. What can we get more out of our Wi-Fi now that we can provide the coverage, now that we can have, X number of clients on this radio and still have good performance? What else can we get from the Wi-Fi network now that we offer it for free to our guests, for our customers at the stadium? I think that's where a lot of the discussions are headed, and that's where I see as the differentiator between the different vendors is what can you get out of that data, and that's where analytics is very important, I think, in driving different objectives for the business.
Exactly. I mean, even and I haven't touched so much on education markets or healthcare markets. I mean, there's kind of the same things going on. Certainly in the healthcare market, it's interesting because there's a parallel to the hotel market, which is patients coming in expect Netflix and FaceTime to work in their bed, and perhaps will negatively score a hospital organization, even though they may have saved their life.
Forget about saving my life. I want to face that.
it's like I want to watch the latest episode of XYZ on Netflix.
Right, and it's got to be a pleasant experience. It can't be a hassle to even just watch an episode, right? While you're sitting there in the bed. And I've had that experience. I've been to the hospital and tried to use the Wi-Fi, and it's slow. I can't even watch off of my own Netflix app, so I rely on the in-house hospital system. But then that's even aged quite a bit, right? So the technology's behind there.
We all have choices, right? We all have choices as consumers, even in a healthcare scenario, right? We all have choices. We can drive down the street and go somewhere else if we think we're going to get a better experience or something that makes some sort of amenity that makes my time spent in that particular location or physical space more enjoyable or with less hassle. And so again back to your point, there's absolutely and I sometimes say follow the dotted line or follow the dollar bill, if you will. There's always a reason why any organization is going to invest in a Wi-Fi infrastructure. It's rarely, if ever, because it's got a 4x4 radio and some new silicon feature built into it. There's very few customers that we ever talk to that are thinking about upgrading their wireless network because the silicon inside the AP is just that fantastic. There's almost always a business reason that the investment is being made. In many different organizations and verticals, they're looking for some level of return, right? Yeah. Some level of return on that investment, and I think it's reasonable, right? It's certainly a reasonable way for all of us, as technical, whether we're selling or implementing, designing, deploying wireless networks, and reality finds why people are investing, why we're all employed. Ultimately, right? Why we all get to do our day jobs, and it's exciting, right? I mean, wireless is obviously there's still the magical element of radio technology, but it's so amazing to me how pervasive Wi-Fi has become and still yet to become globally. Like everywhere we go, you'll see a Wi-Fi sign, you'll see a Wi-Fi radio. I've heard even from the Wi-Fi Alliance, use of the term the People's Network, which is kind of true. Like there's kind of this organic thing that's happened for Wi-Fi over the last 10 years. That even my children, a 4-year-old and 7-year-old are looking for. Well, now I've got them trained. They actually look up when they walk into restaurants and stuff and ask me if that's an access point for my company from the street. They look for the Wi-Fi logo. It's kind of funny to see a 4-year-old going, "They have Wi-Fi here. They have Wi-Fi here." It's like, yeah, it's cool, buddy.
Do they only have purple clothes?
They actually do both like wearing purple, which is good for all of us for sure. But yeah, the Wi-Fi is just such an incredible. It's a phenomena, right? I mean, globally around the world, it's sort of like math or music, right? Things music certainly something that everybody around the world understands, right? It's not something that you need to interpret. Wi-Fi is kind of similar, right? It doesn't matter what language you speak or what country you live in. Wi-Fi is something that you're probably looking for or you're probably connected to right now and using, and hopefully is something that is actually either life improving or perhaps life changing. I mean, to me, when we talk about fans in a stadium, I mean that's a really cool use case. But when we think about doctors, life critical, mission critical scenarios, even students in a classroom, I mean these are areas where Wi-Fi literally has changed the way we live, changed the way we learn. Really is changing the outcomes of all of our lives, not just all the business and technology side of it. I mean, it's become so infused and ingrained into everything we do. It's just incredible. And obviously, I still carry a level of kind of childish excitement around Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's what we use every day. We use Wi-Fi, right? And it could be in ways you didn't even think. Like if you have the watch that uses Wi-Fi to get your analytics out there to the cloud. Like there's so much of it that's prevalent and used over Wi-Fi, especially with the Internet of Things in your home, and how that's going to impact even enterprises where they're going to have control systems done over Wi-Fi because it's just costs less than running wiring everywhere.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the areas that you start seeing IoT expanding into obviously some of the unlicensed frequencies, and 2.4 being kind of the bigger one. When you look at Bluetooth or Zigbee, Thread, all these types of kind of radio technologies, it's really, really interesting again to see. And we do quite a bit of work actually with Thread Stack, which is Google's kind of hopefully the conversion of Zigbee into an IP protocol. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of to see convergence of some of these protocols onto an IP stack, mm-hmm. and then the convergence into an IP network. And so there's some really, really interesting things that come down that path. Thread is actually something that we've implemented Thread Stack into our enterprise APs, which is something I believe truly unique on the market right now. And certainly when you look at building automation and building system controls, there's some pretty interesting use cases for Thread Stack on the 15.4 radio side of it.
So, I wanted to get into a little bit on the security side. So we talked about IoT. Like, how do you guys secure the Wi-Fi network? You mentioned air defense earlier. How does that tie into Wi-Fi?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people look at security as sort of hopefully as something that's sort of a living, breathing type thing, and typically the way we talk about it with our customers is clearly, from there's a couple steps, which is onboarding devices, securely identifying what devices are trying to connect, who's trying to connect, or what is trying to connect. So being able to profile the type of device and making sure that you can authenticate and authorize that particular device onto the network. From there, you start talking about, well, what happens? Okay, so great. Now you've associated. Great. So now what? Well, now comes the next step in terms of how do you segment the traffic? How do you control the traffic? This is where some of our wired wireless capabilities, really unique capabilities, and certainly augmented back to the original question. When you look at some of the Avaya fabric technologies and being able to build fabrics from the switches up to the access points, you get into micro segmentation or hyper secure architecture. So again, going back to devices connecting to the network, well, if you can take let's say a fabric-based solution, and I'll just use a healthcare example. If a particular nurse or a particular medical device is connecting, and we'll use the medical device, right? Because nobody's actually on it. There is no user. So being able to identify that device coming onto the network, device, putting it on a segment on the network, a hyper secure segment that only allows it to communicate from the radio down to something in the data center, perhaps a control server. Maybe it's a telemetry device, so it's sending down to a local telemetry server. From there, now you've got the device on securely. You know what's happening with the traffic. It really now comes down to monitoring both the air and the wire, right? And that's where, again, because we have such pervasive technologies, we can solve these problems. So air defense, perfect question, right? Air defense is looking layer 1, layer 2 up on the RF side of it over the air. Really best of breed technology, has more signatures and more fingerprints than anything that you'll find on market today. Certainly against our competitors, more than twice the amount of protection services that it can provide, either in service, part-time scanning, or on dedicated sensors, depending on the deployment scenario and how secure of an environment the customer is looking for. And then you go back to the wired side, and on the wired side, some of our analytic tool sets that can watch for traffic patterns and some of the deviations that may be occurring and help our customers from a visibility standpoint understand, who's communicating what, where, when, and why on a given network. And so it really becomes a pervasive way to solve the problem, because clearly, security is something that'll continuously evolve, right? Every single day there potentially is a new threat. You really need a holistic network infrastructure to be able to accommodate all of these changes. And then going back to some of the dialogue earlier around policy control up at the access point, that unique element of being able to push a button and, port or protocol or service on your network holistically or specifically, again, we can do that. So click one button and actually enforce rules. So actually traffic control on access points and switches, wired and wireless, simultaneously. It's something that we've been able to do since 2009. I don't believe any of my competitors can still actually push one button and enforce and control traffic across wired and wireless network infrastructures. To us, that's really unifying, the wired and wireless access, distribution, and core data center for our given customers.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about AX. Did you get did Extreme get involved with the IEEE and working on a different draft? And are you guys? I'm guessing you guys are working on some prototypes of APs. And you mentioned earlier that you guys will be, providing products, AX products next year. Can you give us a little bit more details?
Yes. So I was going to be careful on some of these future-looking statements, certainly publicly and without NDAs. The AX, I think, really will be a significant game changer. Obviously, we need client devices. I have, where I get to sit in the industry, I certainly spend a lot of time with the silicon vendors. Clearly the two big ones, typically when we talk about Qualcomm and Broadcom, in terms of infrastructure and client devices. It seems, interestingly enough, that client devices and infrastructure are probably going to be timed in or around the same, right? And we've seen kind of the fluctuation from 11N and 11AC, where clients and infrastructures weren't shipped at the same time, which maybe caused some confusion or kind of delayed some of the deployments. It seems like we will see AX clients and AX infrastructure in 2018. The likelihood on the client side is probably not this coming, Christmas season, but the next. You'll see a whole plethora of AX devices for sure on the market by then, and probably even sooner. It's interesting. So I was having the dialogue with one of those two silicon vendors yesterday, and it's interesting because when we talk about 11AC, there's still a lot of rhetoric that goes around of multi-user MIMO. Multi-user MIMO was a waste of time, didn't do anything. It was all this hype, didn't actually offer anything. And really, when you peel back the onion, the reason that multi-user MIMO really never came into effect was because the big client device manufacturers, and the two major ones are kind of obvious in Apple and Samsung. Neither of them actually adopted it, and they had different motivation in terms of what they wanted in their silicon. It was just not signing a focal point for them. And so, although a lot of people in the industry say, hey, the Wi-Fi infrastructure manufacturers like Extreme and Cisco and Aruba, they kind of point the finger as though it was sort of our failure that multi-user MIMO didn't take off. It's not really a true statement, right? There's other forces at play. But that said, when you look at 11AX, in particular, OFDMA, uplink, downlink, it's a complete new paradigm, and everything that I've seen certainly suggests that both client and infrastructure will have OFDMA capability built into it, almost at the onset. And again, depending on which silicon vendor is being chosen for infrastructure or client, we will start seeing AX improvements. Obviously, it's really about channel efficiency, right? Much more so than just more bandwidth, which has kind of always been the traditional approach of Wi-Fi. And so I think that there's some really, really interesting things to happen with AX. Clearly, we need infrastructure and client devices at the same time operating. I think that there will be some potential interesting configuration choices. We talk about dual 5 gigahertz and these sort of nascent deployment scenarios. I think that dual 5 gigahertz might become a little bit more interesting in the AX world, in an environment that has AX clients where you very well may choose to run one of your radios with AX protocol only, so that the AX clients really have that optimized channel for use, where perhaps your other radio is left for AC and kind of legacy protocols below that. So some interesting scenarios that could come of that. But there's no doubt. I know my competitors are working on it. We're all working on it pretty aggressively. We're all trying to, in the typical space race, trying to get out on market before anybody else. But I suspect that you'll start seeing products in the spring to summer timeframe shipping. In terms of announcements, who knows? All bets are off as to who wants to announce first. But that's probably in or around the timeline that you'll see AX products start shipping. And again, if we get infrastructure and we get clients, there's a lot of reason to believe it's more than just hype this time around. That there's some really serious improvements, and clearly, the more clients that you have and the greater density of clients, and probably the more uplink traffic that you're experiencing, the greater efficiencies that you're going to find OFDMA. So Stadium is certainly one of the focal points for AX, kind of at the onset, where we believe that there'll be a pretty significant increase in terms of channel efficiency and channel use, actually, in the Stadium, but in the Stadium designs. But I think that starts to trickle down into a lot of different scenarios that are Stadium-like. Higher education, when you think about large auditoriums. A large auditorium actually represents kind of one section, or perhaps two sections or three sections. In a stadium, it's actually kind of very similar. And so that's another example where AX probably is going to provide a lot of efficiencies, improvements up and above and beyond what AC has provided, which, frankly, AC has been tremendous, right? I always get, kind of a little frustrated when I hear some of the rhetoric around in the industry around AC and, lack of multi-user line mode and all the rest of it. I mean, AC has been very, very successful when you consider back to 11N, wave 1 versus wave 2 AC created a lot of confusion, but ultimately that technology cycle of AC has been tremendously successful from a bigger picture in terms of step improvements over 11N.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. If you need some beta testers for your APs, I'm sure Roald and I will be happy to help.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to.
All right. Thank you very much, Mike, for all the updates and all the good information. Before we close down, do you want to let everyone know where people can reach you? How can people reach you online?
Yeah, so hopefully I don't have to provide my home address or anything like that. But
no.
First and foremost, extremenetworks.com. If there's any sort of product or company information that you're looking for related to this conversation or anything else that we're bringing to market, extremenetworks.com is certainly a great place and a great resource. I'm reachable. I'm up there on Twitter and LinkedIn and all the other social feeds. If you're looking for me on Twitter, at Leibovitz is a great place to start. And I love engaging on social. Although I've been a little bit quiet over the last 6 to 12 months on social, so I've just been running around and trying not to pull my hair out. But those are probably two really good places to start if you're looking for me. And certainly appreciate the opportunity to chat, and obviously I'm very appreciative of everyone that's taken the time to listen to me and to us on this particular recording.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mike. And when you get the new Magic Quadrant, make sure you share it with us on Twitter.
Yes, I will. Don't worry about it.
Okay, I'm sure. All right, guys. Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode. If you want to leave a review, just feel free to go on iTunes and give us 5 stars. We only accept 5 stars. Sorry. And I guess until next time, have a good week, and we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.